Were you into image at all in the early days? Because at the moment you walk around all looking very sartorially elegant all the time. You know, you wear these vaguely 50s looking clothes and things. But was that image important at the beginning? Can I throw it at Paul?
When we started Orchestra Nuvus, I had hair down to here, as about
well
below the shoulder. And no, we didn't really care. I mean, about how we looked at all.
Yeah. It's still not the most important thing to us, actually. We're far from wanting to be sort of famous faces and household names. Obviously, you know, you have to do television and interviews to sort of like get yourselves along. But we're not. The fame side of it, the image side of it, is not important to us. It perhaps might be a problem in America. To do it in America, you either go in hard with lots of sell and lots of image, perhaps like Adam and the Ants, who's been quite successful there last year, or you sort of you plug away for eons and eons and eons and sort of take 10 years at it, going back sort of every 6 months. It's like painting the longest bridge in the world. By the time you get to one side, you've got to start the other side again.
You already.
Yes.
Well, America, obviously a big challenge for you, but going right back to Liverpool, it must have been, this is a cliche question, it must have been very hard for two people in Liverpool to try and create something new in a city that was still full of Beatle reminiscences. I mean, at the time you were starting, all you ever heard about Liverpool was the Beatles. They're going to name it Beatle Street, they're going to put statues up for the Beatles. Was that hard for you?
Thousands of, like, we were sort of roped in with, like, the new Mersey beat. It was always the new Mersey beat then.
Yes, because there were quite a few good bands came from Liverpool in sort of the late 70s with Echo and the Bunnymen and Teardrop Explodes. But, yeah, it was a little difficult. It was quite strange for us, actually, because I mean, I was much too young to have ever really appreciated the Beatles, so musically they meant very little to me. But to other people, you know, you just mentioned the word Liverpool, especially outside Britain. You mention Liverpool and it's either the football team or the Beatles.
So as far as you were concerned, there was no real problem. It was just what other people put on you.
Yeah.
Musically, at the beginning, you were doing a lot of, it seemed intrinsically dance music that you were involved in. I remember I was most staggered the first time I saw you perform that there was this synthesizer group playing music that you could boogie to. It was quite an unusual thing. Was that part of the whole scheme?
It was a combination of myself and Paul. When we started, I mean, we were quite young. We were just cheerfully knocking out up-tempo songs. But I think there was, in the back of our minds, there was this desire not to be tagged as a sort of a synthesizer band, because, you know, it had this image of sort of being boring and slow and perhaps intellectual or robotic. And we always did sort of write slower songs and more atmospheric songs. But we perhaps chickened out in the early days of especially playing those on stage for fear of people just sort of thinking we just fell into the sort of the slot of what most people considered synth bands to be.
What did you feel, Paul, when synthesizers became the in thing? Because in fact they became so faddish it looked like it would almost come and go in no time at all.
Yeah, I don't know, because we've never really been. I mean, we've never been interested in technology really very much. We just use synthesizers because they're very simple instruments to use.
I remember once talking to Andy, actually, and he'd seen a newspaper that said, top electronic band, OMD, and you said, we're not top, but we're getting there, and we are not an electronic band.
No, that's it. It's sort of, I think when we were about 16 and when we first sort of bumped into Kraftwerk, it was like, oh, wow, you know, we must play synthesizers, this is lovely music. But by the time we started Orchestral Manoeuvres, I think we were quite aware that I mean, people who play synthesizers because they're a synthesizer, because there's an image involved in it, and there still are bands that do use the synth as part of their image. Well, it had been around for a long time, actually. I mean, Kraftwerk's whole image was built around not only the way they looked and the way they sounded, but the way they created their music. And I don't think anybody can do that line better than Kraftwerk. So we just cheerfully battled on with writing songs, really. We like the sound of synth, but certainly we don't try and push them forward as being our image.
And you always used a guitar. I remember seeing you at the earliest gig that I saw you, and there you were with a guitar up front. You know, so
I played bass. That for me is the ideal thing on stage, because now there's 4 of us in the band. 3, Martin, Paul and Malcolm, all have to stay still playing keyboards and drums, but I'm still the one that has the opportunity to bounce around, make an idiot of myself. Which I'm very physical. I like to dance around on stage, and if I had to stand and play a synth, I'd just die of boredom, I think.
Let's talk a bit about the music that you make, because melody is awfully important, it strikes me, in what you do. Now,
Yeah,
Paul,
although it never, our songs never start out with a melody, really.
how do you get the songs together then?
Well, they're mainly very sort of abstract ideas. They could be a lyrical idea, or they could be sort of a noise idea. But we mainly work up from the rhythm track upwards, whereas most bands, they start with their melodies, their vocal melodies,
and then decide what the rhythm's going to be.
Yeah, and then just play along underneath. Whereas we like to nail down a really tight rhythm section first, and then we'll add ideas on top of that. And quite often the melodies, the vocals, or the synth line or something, is quite often the last thing we put on.
I've called it melodic. I think I'd almost say symphonic quite often, the music. You have a very grand sound sometimes.
More recently, we've been getting very pretentious, yes.
I think it's great that you now are doing slower numbers more. You know, I mean, like you started your British concert tour, you were playing your opening number, a long, slow number. I bet you would have been scared to death doing that at the beginning.
I think so, especially because we did start off in the British New Wave clubs, which had sort of just had the, thump, crunch, three-chord wonders.
So you were still getting the sort of spit and sawdust thrown at you?
Yeah, it wasn't quite that bad, but, I think we did really feel if we played slow things, we were really asking for it. So, yeah, now, I mean, the great thing is, and of course now we can play really sizable venues with thousands of watts of PA, so something slow, you can really go to town on it. You can, we've got a few tracks which are really really slow drum patterns. But when you crank up sort of 15 to 20,000 watts of just one floor tom, it can nail you into a seat.
It's true, you feel it physically.
So there's ways and ways around. And of course on stage we do sort of, we add to the beginning of the show, especially with a lot of slides and a lot of sort of special lighting, which is quite effective for the whole thing.